Alright, and with that, welcome back to my second channel. Now, originally, I intended this channel to be for non-racing game content, so I can just kind of talk about other gaming topics that interest me, that don't have anything to do with racing games. And over the last couple months, I have pretty much exclusively used this for racing content. So I'm breaking this tradition with this video today, where I'm going to be just talking about all the non-racing games that I played throughout the year. There has been quite a few. I'm just gonna lose some thoughts on them and also rank them from worst to best. So I'm gonna start talking about the games that I liked the least that I played this year, and we're gonna move on to some of the best. And I've played some really good shit this year, so let's just get right into it. Now at the bottom of the list, we have a fairly old game that I just kind of bought and played on a whim. And it's Dead Island. Now, Dead Island is actually, I feel like kind of what kick-started my interest with zombie games. I remember when I was like, definitely way too young to be playing and watching such games. I remember watching some Let's Plays on this game back when I was younger, and I was like, oh man, this is so cool. Like, oh, this is like the coolest shit I've ever seen. But obviously, you know, growing up in a fairly strict household, I was never really allowed to play any adult-rated games. So I just never played Dead Island, no matter how interested I was into in it as a kid. And so I picked it up. I think it was in some kind of bundle, and I played it. And I think it's really only it really is the only game in this entire video that I would actually call bad. Where I would say, for more than half of my playtime, I really did not enjoy myself. Now, you may know that Dead Island was made by Techland, who would end up making the amazing Dying Light, which I have played a couple years ago, so it's not gonna be, you know, brought up here. But Dead Island really was, you could tell it really was like their base game, sort of. Like, they just tried to build some kind of basic melee-focused zombie game, and it is barely functional. So let me just start this off by saying I played this alone, and not in co-op, which was definitely a mistake. This was 100% meant to be a co-op game, and playing alone is definitely not the intended experience. This was extremely obvious because obviously if you play alone, you can pick like one of like 4 characters, and if you play alone, obviously it's always just you, but in the story cutscenes, other characters show up with you in those cutscenes. So it's like, it doesn't make sense. Like, they're not actually physically there, but then they just magically appear for like certain cutscenes. It's a really weird and messy game. The one thing that I kind of liked about this game was the first area that you're in, like the resort area. I thought it was beautiful. There wasn't like, I feel like the layout was like kind of cramped and not great, and getting from one place to another was difficult. There was cars that you could drive, but there wasn't really enough space. Like, layout-wise, these maps are terrible. But it looked great. I like the vibes. You know, I like the, like, you know, gory zombie stuff contrasted with the pretty resort area. But that's as far as my praise goes. I feel like the combat at times, you know, might have been a little bit satisfying and getting stronger. Everything else about this game is straight trash. Like, at some point you leave the resort area and you get to the town area, which is basically a bootleg cheap version of Dying Light's town area. And also eventually I think you get to like some other area, and they were crap. Navigating them was terrible. They looked boring. There was nothing really happening in the game. The combat felt clunky. The areas to explore, there was just not really much there. The leveling system was just kind of bland, and boss fights, if there were any, were stupid. Quests were boring. The main story was actually awful. Like, the thing is, it's actually really easy for me to suspend my disbelief when it comes to stories in video games, but this story was so goddamn bad. Even I had to like step back a couple times and be like, Jesus Christ, this is terrible. So yeah, to wrap it up, I'm gonna be giving every game like a rating from 0 to 100, or like in percent. Let's just do it like the moist meter. Dead Island, I'm giving this a 25%, and I think that is being very, very generous. That's, you know, me, you know, basically giving them a bit of slack, considering it was like their first zombie game, and, you know, I liked the resort area, I liked what they had going, you know, they clearly had some cool ideas, but this is a absolute mess of a game, and I would never recommend anyone to play it. So, coming up next, we have the next Dead Island game. Now, you might think that, you know, the sequel to Dead Island is Dead Island 2, which I think also released in 2023. No, it was actually Dead Island Riptide. It directly follows up the story of the first Dead Island, and it introduces a new map, some changes, etc. Long story short, it still, for the most part, has the same issues as the previous game. It doesn't like fix any of the underlying issues with, let's say, combat, for example, or navigation. I actually thought navigating, like, basically what Riptide does, it puts you on a bigger map. I think the previous game, the regular Dead Island, had 3 smaller ones. Riptide had like 1 bigger one. And unfortunately, navigating it, I thought it was even worse because of it, because the map would also not like work properly. So you would basically put a waypoint somewhere, and it just would disappear all the time. This happened all the time. And yeah, overall, it just didn't really click for me. They introduced like 1 new playable character who I played as, who basically uses brass knuckles and shit. That was kind of fun, just beating the shit out of zombies. But other than that, yeah, the story was somewhat better. Honestly, I completely forgot what the story was about, which isn't a good thing either, considering I played these games fairly recently. Like, it wasn't like I played these, you know, in the beginning of the year. So yeah, some missions were really annoying. I remember they did a lot with like tower defense stuff. I thought that was just bad, and not for me. So yeah, Dead Island Riptide, plugging it into the moist meter. I'm giving this one a 35%. It's somewhat better than Dead Island, in my opinion. Not really worth playing still, but yeah, it is what it is. So now we are actually in the territory where I'd say these games are somewhat worth playing. So we're gonna continue with Saints Row the 3rd Remastered. Now, I did play the first Saints Row ages ago. In fact, Saints Row the 3rd is, at least as far as I remember, the first shooter game that I ever played when I was like 14 or something. I played it on Steam when it was on a free weekend once, without my parents knowing, obviously. And I think I'm pretty confident saying that's the first like adult game that I ever played. And obviously, you know, since it was my first game with like guns and I played as a kid, I was like, ooh, this is so cool, you know. Yeah, I did play a lot of other Saints Row games since then. In fact, I actually played all of them for the most part. And I did go back to the remaster of Saints Row the 3rd because I was like, you know, hey, this, you know, it might be a nice trip down memory lane. But unfortunately, it was kind of like, you know what they say, like, never meet your heroes? That's kind of the experience that I had. So, Saints Row the 3rd is, for the most part, just okay. It has a few standout moments, like, for example, that one mission where you drop into the penthouse on a parachute while Kanye West's Power is playing. It was probably, like, the absolute best moment of the entire game. And maybe also the final mission, where, I mean, you guys, like, you can decide what you want to do, so I'm not gonna spoil anything, but there's also a song playing, I think was like, I Need a Hero. That's the song that was playing, which was cool, you know. But now that I actually played most of the Saints Row games at this point, and I know these characters, you know, especially after coming off of Saints Row 2, I really hate what they did with the story here. It's so dirty, and I've lost so much respect for this game, having played the previous ones and seeing what they did with certain characters, especially like the entire ending, where it's so hard to explain. And honestly, I probably shouldn't explain this because I don't want to like spoil you guys too much, because I want you to just watch these videos here without having to be worried about spoilers. I just really hate what they did with the characters, with the story. The gameplay was nothing really to write home about. It was very basic, at times very clunky. It's an okay game. Once again, I feel like it's the same as with Dead Island. It's clearly meant to be a co-op game, and me not playing it in co-op may have been a mistake. Maybe I would have enjoyed this more in co-op. But as stands, I thought it was okay at best, but really, really insulting as a fan. So yeah, I'm giving this one a 45%. It's okay, but I don't know if it's something I would play again. Alright, next up we actually have a new game. So all of the games that I just talked about were like a decade old. So we're actually now finally talking about a new game, and this one's Assassin's Creed Mirage. Now, I originally didn't even mean to play this game originally, because I was only like mildly interested in it. For the record, I'm actually or at least I used to be a massive Assassin's Creed nerd back when I was like a teenager. But once these games kind of started to become more like RPGs, they sort of lost me. I remember playing Assassin's Creed Origins, which was like the first time they went more for this RPG approach, and being like, this isn't really for me. So I never really played any of the other ones. And with Mirage, they kind of wanted to pivot back and kind of course correct to, you you know, a more traditional Assassin's Creed experience. So you have a more compact, tighter city where you can actually do some nice parkour, if you want to call it that. And everything was more stealth focused. So, you know, they had me interested somewhat, but it's not something that I really would have bought. However, I just so happened to still have, like, I think like 1 week left of Ubisoft Plus, like the Ubisoft subscription model that you can get. Because I got Ubisoft Plus originally so I can stream the Crew Motorfest, and I only had like 7 days left. So like I was like, alright, well, guess I'll finish this game in 7 days because why not? Yeah, long story short, it's painfully mediocre. It's really painfully mediocre. There's a lot of things that I just didn't think were special at all. Like, I thought the combat was actually pretty bad. The story was also, like, kind of trash. In a way where there's nothing memorable about it. I couldn't tell you the names of any characters now. There's nothing I remember about the plot. Like, it loses you really quickly too. Like, 2 hours in, I was already, like, mentally checked out from the story. And which is a shame, because I think especially the characters and the stories used to be one of Assassin's Creed's strong points, like especially during the Ezio saga and how that intertwined with Altair's story in the first Assassin's Creed, mixed with this like kind of like science fiction modern day stuff that unfortunately I think they dropped with Assassin's Creed 4, which is just a shame. You have none of that here. It's the most bland and boring story I could possibly imagine. The only saving graces for Mirage, I think, were the stealth, which was really fun, especially because you could, especially with the way equipment and tools worked. So, for example, you could get something like a blow dart, and you could upgrade that blow dart. However, you actually had to decide how you want to use the tool. So, for example, you can use the blow dart in a way where, I don't know, like, if, for example, it vaporizes opponents, right? So, you know, they don't get discovered if you knock them down or whatever. Or you could use it in a more offensive way where you have more ammunition or whatever. You know, it was really cool what they tried here, but at the end of the day, it wasn't enough, especially because they kind of did the opposite with the equipment. Because another thing that I really liked about previous Assassin's Creed games was how it felt like you become progressively stronger, right? Like you get better equipment, better armor, better swords, you upgrade everything, you buy stores all over the city, you build up this brotherhood. None of that feeling was here. Like, it feels like you could... I finished the game exactly where I started it. At least strength-wise. So that power escalation that I really liked about these Assassin's Creed games just wasn't here. So it really just felt like... I don't know, it feels kind of rude to say, but it really did feel like a shadow of its former self. I did like the map in Baghdad. I thought it looked, like, very pretty, and I also liked that they built it more around movement, right? I wouldn't say it's like great, and I wouldn't say the parkour is fantastic in this, but there's at least more you can do. You know, it's not like just plain fields, it's an actual city where you can just, you know, walk around in and, you know, walk over rooftops. That really gave me some, you know, some classic AC vibes for once. But then this cool Baghdad map is surrounded by a bunch of nothingness, where there's just nothing there, just a bunch of dunes, and, you know, just there's nothing, no side quests, nothing to collect. It's actually just empty space. Yeah, plugging Assassin's Creed Mirage into the rating, I'll give this a 50%. It's okay, but this is a game that I really only recommend to the most die-hard Assassin's Creed fans, and even towards those, I'd advise to be a bit cautious. Alright, and totally out of left field, we're moving on to Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, which is a fighting game spin-off of Persona 4, which I'll get to later, because that's something I played this year as well, but it's gonna come near the end of the video, which, yeah, big surprise. But this is about the fighting game spin-off, and it's gonna be kind of difficult to talk about this first, but long story short, you know, the problem is with me that I'm not really into fighting games. I've never been. I found fighting games a really difficult genre to get into, because it's not something you can just kind of play casually, right? And especially not on your own. At least that's what I think these games aren't really made for. Now, with that being said, I think Persona 4 Arena Ultimax did a pretty good job at getting me interested in this genre. So it's getting some plus points for that. However, in saying that, Persona 4 Arena, and also just Persona 4, the main thing that I was really interested in with this one, and the main reason why I played this in the first place, because as I said, I'm not super interested into fighting games, was the story, right? It follows up the story from Persona 4, which I absolutely loved, and I wanted to know, you know, what they do with these characters. And the long story short is not much. So basically, Arena Ultimax has let's just for the sake of simplicity say 2 story modes. One is from the original Persona 4 Arena, which was another game released prior, and then the Ultimax story. And these 2 are very different in quality. I thought and to just put things short, because this video is already going to be way too long if I drag on this for way too long, but the original Arena story was just not great. Not because the story was bad, but basically you had to experience the story with every single character. So every single playable character in the story mode of, you know, the first story, basically you retreat a bunch of story threads over and over and over and over, like up to 12 times. It was absolute insanity. And the pacing of, honestly, both story modes is extremely slow. Way slower than I'm used to from even the slowest paced games that I've played. And I think a really massive indicator for how much I actually struggled with the pacing of this game is that I just didn't pick this up often. Like, I think this is like a 44-hour game I've noted down here, and it took me like, I think like 4 months to finish, because the pacing is so slow that I just didn't really feel like a huge urge to get back into it every time, you know? So the slow pace, you know, retreading story beats over and over and over again, with the story itself not even being like a fantastic, I was just kind of bummed out, you know. I was kind of hoping for this to be like a banger follow-up story-wise to Persona 4, but that's not really it. And in saying that, what I did find was a surprisingly fun fighting game, which I really was not prepared for, and it did get me interested into fighting games. So it's a weird thing, you know. It's kind of this kind of thing where you didn't really get what you bargained for, but you got something else instead, and it's like, well, cool, but you know, it's a weird one. At the end of the day, I think despite everything, I wish the story mode, and for the record, the story mode is pretty much the main thing that I played. I wish there was more fighting, so there would be like, I kid you not, like 15 minutes of listening to just dialogue, and then one fight. One round. That's over in like 20 seconds, 20 to 30 seconds. So you have like 20 to 30 seconds of fighting interspersed with like 10 to 15 minutes of dialogue. I wish there would have been more fighting and less dialogue, ultimately. I think that would have made this game a million times better. As is, I'm giving this a 65%. Really only recommend this one for diehard fans of Persona 4. Otherwise, I don't know, there's probably better fighting games out there anyways. Alright, and now we're getting into games where I would genuinely say I thoroughly enjoyed them. And we're starting off with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is the third and probably last of the reboot trilogy of Tomb Raider games. And yes, I did play the ones before them. And Shadow of the Tomb Raider is probably like the most safe by the numbers, but still really fun video game. Like, I think this is a game that you could just, it's like a video game. It's it's really hard to describe, and it sounds really negative what I'm saying here, but basically what it boils down to, and I'm not gonna have much to say about this game because of it, is the gameplay is just fun. Like, you know, it's nothing really inherently wrong about it. It has a lot of it. It has like climbing, it has stealthing, it has combat, it has exploration, it has like a little bit of everything, and everything is just fine. I don't think nothing about the gameplay really blew me away. But it's all fun, you know. There's nothing about the gameplay where I'd say like, oh man, that really sucked, you know. Maybe the puzzles were a little bit annoying at times, but rating puzzles is always difficult because it's like, maybe I'm just stupid, right? But you know, it's a very safe by the numbers game that's also very pretty, I gotta say. There's probably a reason why Shadow of the Tomb Raider always gets used for like graphics card tests on YouTube and stuff. Yeah, obviously it's a very pretty game. I think the main thing that for me personally was like a massive letdown is, once again, how forgettable the story is. We've had this quite a few times by now in the video, but this one, once again, I thought it was so forgettable, which is such a shame. Like, they had like moments where I feel like they tried to do something with the characters, where they wanted to go for like some strong moments, but just didn't really hit, because the story was just not interesting. Like, for example, there was one flashback from Lara Croft's past, where you play as her being a kid, and I was like, hey, that's really cool. I wonder if we're gonna see more of that. No, we didn't. Instead, it's, you know, nothing really special story-wise, and something that I really started to just kind of ignore very early on. If the story on this one was a little bit stronger, which I remember it was on Rise of the Tomb Raider, which was the first, like not the previous game, the game that preceded Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I remember that one at least had like a really good villain. Not so much here. It just kind of feels like you're meandering around a bunch and you're just like semi-interested in what's happening. And I think one major thing that really didn't help was that it feels like characters are always just kind of talking over you. So Lara Croft would always just mention random stuff that she just happens to know, and it just never really gets explained. It felt like everything just kind of went over my head, lore-wise, but that might be a me issue, I don't know. But yeah, it just really didn't pick up story-wise, at least not for me. So yeah, I'm only giving this one a 70%, which once again, it's a good rating. Like at 70%, I'm like, all right, these are games that I can really recommend. So yeah, and also just the entire reboot trilogy of Tomb Raider is surprisingly good. I would really recommend checking them out. All right, now we're actually coming up to the game that I played last this year, but also the first game that I played on this little thing here, the Steam Deck, which I got this month. And it's Like a Dragon Kurohyou, or Yakuza Black Panther, or Ryuga Gotoku Kurohyou, however you want to call it. Basically what this is, it's a spin-off of the Yakuza, or as it's known nowadays with the modern games Like a Dragon series, and it's an older one. I think it released in 2010 for PSP. And yeah, it was a fun one, surprisingly. I mean, I gotta be honest, I'm pretty biased when it comes to Yakuza and Like a Dragon games, because it's pretty much one of my top 3 favorite franchises. So going into it, I already went in with a certain amount of bias. However, it's worth noting that gameplay-wise, this one's very different. So, you know, usually the RPG or Like a Dragon Yakuza games are brawler. So basically, you're usually fighting like a bunch of dudes in like a 3D environment, and you're beating people up and you're doing shit. This one's more of it's a little bit more similar to a fighting game where the camera is just kind of like side by side, or like to the side. If I show some gameplay, you'll probably get what I mean. So in that, it was definitely something different, but I appreciated it for what it was. Gameplay-wise, it felt fairly fresh. The main problem with this one is just that you could tell it's a PSP game, and you know, it sounds like a weird issue because it's like, yeah, of course it's a PSP game. What did I expect? But the problem is, like, you know, what I like about the Like a Dragon games is that there's just a whole lot to do, and what there's to do is usually really, really fun. With this one, I gotta say, not so much. So you have like a bunch of sub-stories, aka side quests that you can do, and I didn't really think any of them were super entertaining or interesting, maybe with like a few exceptions. The minigames in this one also really didn't blow me away. I honestly thought for the most part they kinda sucked, which is a shame because those are usually extremely fun in the Yakuza games. I think really the major redeeming factor for this one was the story. And I don't even mean the plot by itself. I think the plot by itself actually kind of falls flat, because basically in the game, the way it works is that your main character, Tatsuya, is basically forced to fight in a tournament of sorts. And you have to basically defeat 10 main opponents. And so what the game does is kind of like this villain of the week concept that you may be familiar with from anime. And it's basically where they pull up a new antagonist every single chapter, and then that one gets like all the focus, and then once you beat him, he's just kind of gone. That's kind of the problem that the story had here, so I feel like they should have just used more time to actually build up the main plot. Because the main issue with the story on this one is that the actual final boss is just a nobody, and it's probably one of the worst final bosses in the entire Yakuza series, which is quite a shame. However, to upset that, I gotta be honest and say that the main character of Kurohyou is probably one of the best written main characters in the entire series. And it's mainly because of the insane amount of like character development he goes through. Because if there's like one problem that I have with the Yakuza stories, is that the main characters barely evolve. So they usually, not always, but like usually for the most part, roughly exactly where they began when the story is all over. Not like that with Kurohyou. So your main character Tatsuya, when you start the game, is an absolute asshole. There's no other way to say it. There's an absolute asshole. And he evolves from like fighting and from good guidance and, you know, just a bunch of stuff happening to him and his friends. He evolves into like a much bigger, more honorable person, and that felt really satisfying. And made me wonder why they don't do this more often with main characters in the Yakuza games. So that one was great. But other than that, there were some like more specific gripes that I had with the game as well. Like, for example, I think combat-wise, you have like 20 fighting styles, which is nuts. So you can do like MMA or Kung Fu or Karate or whatever. However, the problem with that is that oftentimes either some fighting styles feel extremely similar, or some others are just super useless. And maxing them out, like you can basically level and gain experience for these fighting styles. Maxing them out takes ages, and it's like an absolute grind. So that's like an issue. Another issue is that, you know, going around the map is also extremely tedious. Usually in the Yakuza games you have like a bunch of taxis all over the map, so you can basically fast travel. None of that here. If there's like a map marker on the other end of the map, you have to walk there, and you will run not only into random street fights, but also the police, who will just, when they catch you, teleport you to a random spot on the map, and you just kind of have to figure out where to go from there. It was a bit of a mess. And there were also some more specific issues with the combat, mainly relating to the bosses, where sometimes they would have attacks that you just literally can't avoid. So it wasn't perfect. It's definitely rough around the edges, but you know, it's something where I could tell a lot of heart was put into. So I'm still giving Like a Dragon Kurohyou a 71. Ironically enough, I feel like it's the exact it's like the polar opposite to the previous game we talked about, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, where Shadow of the Tomb Raider is a just plain fun game, but that's very safe and doesn't really push any boundaries. It's just kind of like it stays very well within its lane, and it's exactly what you would expect. Whereas Like a Dragon Kurohyou is the exact opposite, where they tried random shit and oftentimes it didn't work. But like when it works, it's fantastic. Like the main character is great. I also loved the art style of the stories. At this point I probably showed a bunch of them. I loved how they, you know, drew everything. Like the entire art style of the game is fantastic. The music is great, right? Like there's so much to love there, and even if there exist more issues than, let's say, with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, it still edges itself a little bit over it for me personally, because the stuff that's there to love is just stuff that I will remember. Alright, now moving on, we're actually talking about, I think this is the first Nintendo game? Yeah, I think it is. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. I don't even know why I played this, I just kind of played this on the whim because I was in the mood for Nintendo stuff. And the weird thing about this one is, as the title already suggests, it's basically 2 games in one. So this one's gonna be a little bit awkward, and I'm gonna try my best to like separate the two. Full stop, I'm not like a major Mario fan. I played a lot of Mario games, and I think there's also another one coming up here. But yeah, Super Mario 3D World, let's just talk about this one first. I thought it was fine. I played a bunch of other 3D Marios, and this one I think is actually my least favorite. I think I played Super Mario 64, Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. I think I might actually be it already. And I think amongst those, this one's unfortunately kind of my least favorite. I'm not even sure why. I think it's because there wasn't really anything super memorable, except maybe like the last couple of levels. But it just felt like, I don't know, that little something was just missing. You know, there's a reason why I think a lot of people describe this as like a 3D, like a 2D Mario in 3D. Basically, where it's very safe. It doesn't have like any like super cool ideas. And also, I don't know, this may have been just me, but I also had some issues with perspective. Like, it was really hard for me to just land on platforms. Like, something to do with the perspective of where the camera is. Like, I whiffed so many jumps, and I swear to God, that's not usually a problem for me. But I whiffed so many jumps, fell down so many pitfalls. I don't know what happened, but I, for some reason, had like massive issues just doing basic platforming in this game. But at the end of the day, I kind of feel the same way about this game as Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Like, there's nothing like majorly awful that you can pick out. It's like a very safe game, very by the numbers, but that also unfortunately means there isn't really anything that blows you away and really sticks with you for all that long. So if I had to rate Super Mario 3D World by itself, I'd give it also a 70%. However, the little add-on, Bowser's Fury, that they added on top of it when they re-released the game on Switch, that one I actually thought was fantastic. Because it's now this is kind of like Kurohyou again, which we talked about as well. Like, you know, it tries new things and sometimes it doesn't work. Like this Bowser mechanic that, you know, basically Bowser can awaken at any time basically and just make things kind of annoying for you. That can get extremely annoying, yes, but also it's an interesting mechanic, and also feel like visually they tried something new with this, you know, and also like the giant fights when you actually fight Bowser and your big cat Mario, like that shit slaps, and the music kicks in, that shit just slaps, you know. And also just like that it was more focused. I actually got 100% in Bowser's Fury because it didn't take that long and I actually had fun doing it. So Bowser's Fury, I actually had a lot more fun with, and I would actually give that one an 85. So if we basically put the games together, I'm giving this a 78%. Alright, this is gonna be a little bit of tonal whiplash, but moving on from like funny Nintendo platformer, we're moving on to Deus Ex Mankind Divided. So a very, very dark and serious game. And prior to this, I have actually played Deus Ex Human Revolution, which was basically the previous game in the story and also just generally. And I remember really, really liking it. Not really finding too many issues about it. Until I eventually watched H-Bomber Guy's video about the game where he said the game is kinda mid. And I feel like I was kinda like throwing cold water into my face. But I still enjoyed the game regardless. And going into Deus Ex Mankind Divided, it was rough initially. And it's mainly because the PC port was absolutely terrible. It was crazy. Like I had crashes virtually every 30 minutes. Like it was nuts. I remember I had to do the first mission, like the tutorial mission in the game, 2 times over because the game would just crash in the following cutscene, and it like really gave me a really terrible first impression. And even after that, you know, the game just kept crashing all the time, and I didn't know why. I think at some point it even froze my PC. The PC port is awful, and I can't believe they're actually selling the game as is without any like notes. However, that being said, I did end up managing to fix the crashing issue. So for anyone that's looking into playing this game themselves, number one, do not put the graphics over high, okay? Don't put the graphics on ultra or very high. Put them on high at the very maximum and turn off all the extra bullshit, like the cloth physics. Turn all of that crap off. And number two, there's something you can do. You can basically restrict the amount of RAM stuff on like a specific hard drive uses, or at least that's what I think it does. You know what, I'll just link a tutorial in the description if you guys want to see it. But there's ways to basically limit the crashing, and at some point I didn't actually have any issues with it at all anymore. So now we can actually talk about the game itself. I enjoyed it for sure. I think the strongest points of this game 100% were the game map, Prague. So gorgeous. Or just generally the vistas in this game, so gorgeous. Like this is just a really pretty game, like by all accounts. I also really enjoyed the level design. I think this is something where they actually really stepped up their game from Deus Ex Human Revolution, which, you know, if you wanted to stealth these games, which is how I play these games, I try to play these like mostly non-lethal stealth. Basically, the Human Revolution had this issue where for every problem, there's usually like a vent somewhere in the area that you can use to just completely circumvent certain areas. This game still has this issue, but there's so many more pathways and areas that you can explore. It is crazy. Like the maps in this game are extremely well done. Like this is actually some peak level design in this game. Super good. Now, unfortunately, unlike Human Revolution, I think this one, once again, really suffered in the story department. At least, like, the main plot. I actually found the side quests that you do in this game way more interesting and way more engaging than the main plot. The main plot was extremely boring and didn't really offer any characters that were super interesting. There was, like, maybe 1 or 2 plot twists near the end where I was like, oh, shit, that's kind of cool. But, like, story-wise, I was really hoping for more. And thankfully, the DLCs that I think you can buy for like $3 nowadays, they do offer a little bit more in terms of story, so I feel like I kind of got my fill with those. However, you know, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, it did get a lot of crap when it released. Apparently, I was like not into the game or the franchise as a whole back when it released. But playing it now in 2023, I really enjoyed it. Honestly, it's just a very solid, very pretty-looking stealthing game with, you know, lots of exploration. That I don't know, I just enjoyed. I gotta say, also great music, once again, just like the previous game. So, yeah, just straight up giving this a 79%. Alright, next up we're talking about another Like a Dragon / Yakuza / RGG game. And this one's actually not even part of the same series. So, we're talking about Judgment next. I actually had massively inflated expectations when it came to Judgment, because I was already a massive fan of, you know, these games, and this spin-off is basically very similar gameplay wise, but it's, you know, kind of tells its own story, has its own characters, and doesn't actually connect all that much to the other Yakuza games prior to this one. And I remember reading that this one had like a fantastic story, and it was like peak stuff, and I think it was mainly those expectations that kind of soured my experience, which is really unfortunate. Now, once again, we are in the territory where I would say I enjoyed these games, and by that extension, I also enjoyed Judgment. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I kind of hoped I would, given that everyone was praising this as like some kind of like masterpiece, which I think it just kind of missed out on. But going into this game was extremely fun. So the game looks fantastic. I think all the modern Yakuza and Like a Dragon games look absolutely stunning. But I don't know, there was just something about the look of this game. Like, I don't know, maybe it's like the blue filter or anything or something like that. But something about this game just looked extremely pretty to me. Peak art direction. I also like what they did with the UI. Like, all the small stuff feels so good. The music is straight up banger. And overall, the combat looks fantastic. Like, the combat, we'll get to the gameplay later, but just in terms of like audio visuals, this game is jaw-dropping, honestly, and it really left a huge impression on me in that regard. And what's interesting is for this channel, I actually plan to make a longer critique video of this game, and I have like a bunch of bullet points written down here that I'm just gonna gloss over. I'm not sure if I'm still gonna make this video, but like the main thing that people really brought up about this game is that the story is like insanely good. This is like the best story these developers have ever written. And it's like, I don't know if I would agree with that. It's certainly a strong story, don't get me wrong. Like, I enjoyed following the story and everything. I guess what I wasn't ready for is that this is really a detective story, which sounds stupid because, yeah, obviously it is. You play as a detective. But I guess one thing that I personally liked about the previous Yakuza games is that they were very, very character-driven. And there was always, at least somewhere, a really, really strong character moment. You know, especially talking about Kurohyou earlier. That's literally what sold the game for me. This entire character progression from your main character, that's literally what sold the experience for me. And you don't really get something like that in Judgment. Like, you have this insane conspiracy that you just kind of need to uncover, and I think that's extremely well written. But me personally, I was just kind of lacking emotional investment. Now, before I go into like a massive rant on Judgment and people will think that I hated the game, I'm just gonna like very quickly gloss over some critique points that I have noted down here. So, for example, there's vital skills that you really need. They're super basic skills for the combat, and they're usually hidden behind some dumbass collectibles or gambling minigames or other BS. I do not like that. One major critique point about this game that gets brought up all the time is the mortal wound system. So basically, certain characters have attacks that can permanently erase part of your health bar so that you can't heal past it anymore. If it was only limited to bosses, I think it would have been perfectly fine. But random encounters spawning enemies with weapons behind your back that are shooting you and then erase your max health, that just really sucked. Since you are a detective, there's some detective gameplay like tailing or investigating. Personally, I didn't find any of it super interesting. I think that's where the sequel, which by the way we'll talk about as well, did a lot better. And one final thing, to just rub a little bit more salt in the wound. The PC port on this one, once again, also is not great. The problem for me was that I played the game at over 60 FPS initially, and what that does, it basically makes certain minigames harder, certain animations just completely break. So for example, in certain chase sequences where you would have to chase someone, the NPCs would just get stuck somewhere. And some QTEs are also just straight up impossible. So yeah, that's great. But that shall end my rant on the gripes that I had with Judgment. Once again, I thought this was a really, really good game. It's just not what I personally expected. And it's also, in my opinion, not this like peak masterpiece that people really make it out to be. So plugging it in, I'm also giving this one a 79%, same rating as Deus Ex Mankind Divided. Both fantastic games, both really fun. Check them out. I hope you like me rambling on about Yakuza Like a Dragon games, because we have another one coming up. And this is, once again, a game that released this year. And it's Like a Dragon Ishin. So this one is, once again, a spin-off. I played a lot of spin-off this year, it seems. Jesus Christ. But this is basically a samurai Edo period spin-off of the Like a Dragon series. That's kind of weird. It basically uses a bunch of characters from the main series and basically turns them into different characters, but with pretty much the same personality. It's kind of weird. But this game was a lot of fun. Now, there might be some recency bias because I played this on launch, basically, and yeah, I mean, it's fun. I didn't have... maybe some people might raise an eyebrow over me putting this over Judgment. I can already tell you I'm not putting this like massively over Judgment. But I actually really enjoyed this game quite a lot. I really enjoyed the story, which I know a lot of people didn't really like too much. But I actually like that they went for a different approach with the story, because the story is basically about, I guess, patriotism, which is a really weird thing to build your story around, but I thought it was a really interesting concept. And especially I like the way that it wraps up, and it kind of tells you, you know, the value in being proud of the country you live in, which is, at least for me, really, really interesting. It's not something that I ever really thought about. So just for making me think about something new, it's already getting some massive plus points. Now, gameplay-wise, it's hit and miss. So you basically have 4 fighting styles, and they couldn't be more different in terms of quality. So you have a fighting style where you basically just use your sword. That one's mainly used for just, you know, one-on-one fights, and for those, it works perfectly fine. For anything else, it's a little bit too slow, gotta be honest. But in one-on-one fights, and I gotta be honest, also boss fights, like one-on-ones with swords, holy shit, that stuff was awesome. And also just generally, like, the open world, I know I'm kind of like going all over the place here with my points, but the world also looked super pretty. Now, in essence, this is actually a port, as if you will. Ishin in of itself is actually an older game. I think this was released in 2014 on the PlayStation 4, and this one's kind of like a remaster, remake kind of thing. A little bit of both, but also neither, because they ported the game to a new engine, but it's still mostly the same. Look, it's weird. Let's not talk about it any further. It's a pretty looking game. Gameplay-wise, it's fun. Where was I? Oh yeah, fighting styles. So then you have another fighting style where you basically wield a gun, and this one's by far the most broken fighting style, no questions asked. If you get a gun with like high fire rate, you can spam the shit out of that. Enemies can't do anything against that, at least like most random enemies. It's absolutely busted, and was a lot of fun because of it. I would not recommend using it too much, but like, goddamn, like getting a pistol, because there's no such thing as ammo and reloading with like at least basic ammo, right? So you can actually just spam the gun and just shoot everyone. It was the most stupid fun. It's the same kind of fun that I get from playing GTA with cheats. That's how it felt to me. But super busted. And then you have a fighting style where you basically dual wield a pistol and a sword, and that one is awesome. Like that one is easily the best fighting style and the most fun. The animations are so smooth, the heat actions, everything just really clicks with that fighting style. So good, so fun, love the feedback, everything about this just clicks. And then you have a fighting style where you just use your hands, and that one's so garbage, I literally had to install the mod that gives me twice the damage on attacks to even make it viable. We don't talk about that one. But overall, I just really enjoyed this game. This is, once again, like just a nice, fun samurai game with fun combat. Great story, and just, I don't know, I don't know what it is with this game. I just really enjoyed it. It has some issues, like for example, the grinding in this game is awful. If you actually want to do stuff after the main story, have fun, man. It's probably some of the most grindy, asinine shit I've ever seen. But I just didn't care. I liked the combat enough, I liked the music, I liked the setting, I liked the boss fight. Like, so much to like about this game. And it's a shame that people just kind of forgot about it and stopped talking about it after it came out, because I really liked it. So I'm giving this one an 80%. So yes, I'm putting this over judgment for the Yakuza fans watching, but not that much. This is once again just personal preference, because I like this story more. But they're both fantastic games that I think are like extremely close to one another. Alright, and with that, we're going back to Nintendo. So I already talked about a Mario 3D platformer, and here's another one. So I, for whatever reason, decided to revisit Super Mario Galaxy. I don't even know why. I think, you know why? I think it's because I managed to connect a Switch Pro controller to my PC. I was like, hey, that's cool, let me test it with something. And then I just booted up Mario Galaxy, and I just didn't stop playing. So yeah, well, this is in here too. So Mario Galaxy is a game that I definitely played in my childhood before and really loved. And I know this is a game that a lot of people really love as well. And I liked it, but I'm not sure if I don't know. I feel like it's once again a kind of game where I have it better in memory, and I think that has kind of soured my experience. And it's something that I kind of learned with other games this year as well, is that maybe sometimes it's better not to revisit childhood games, so that you can just kind of live in blissful ignorance that this game is like an absolute masterpiece. Because when I revisited it, I thought it was like good. I thought it was really good. But I don't know, something about it just didn't really click with me. Like the massive loading times really pissed me off. I thought some of the worlds weren't super interesting. Like some of the levels were just kind of whatever. However, what I really do appreciate this game for, and it's hard to put into words, it's somber. You know, like it really... Because when you think Mario games, you think, oh yeah, happy, family-friendly, you know, everyone's happy, kind of fun. And that's honestly not really what Mario Galaxy is. Mario Galaxy at times feels lonely. And I don't want to use the word depressing, but like there's just something about the atmosphere in this game where sometimes I would actually literally just stand and just take in the atmosphere, like just being out in space and just enjoying the emptiness of it and the silence. And that's really interesting, especially for a Super Mario game. And that's really what I mainly enjoyed about this game. It's just the atmosphere, which I thought was so interesting. I thought going into this, I would love the gameplay, and honestly, like, the gameplay was fun. But for me personally, at least, not anything like super mega special. For example, I also don't like the way power-ups work. I mean, power-ups are basically not even a thing in this game. Like, for the most part, you're just Mario. But yeah, just the atmosphere, man. Like, I don't know. It's something that, once again, as I said, it's hard to put into words. 83%. That's what I'm giving this one. Alright, so moving on, we are talking about, I think, the first JRPG in this list. And trust me, they're gonna be a lot more plentiful, which kind of, I think tells you a little bit about my tastes. So we are talking about Persona 3 FES next, which I think was one of the first games that I played this year. Yeah, I mean, once again, I'm biased. I'm a Persona fanboy, in case you couldn't already tell from me using the music a lot in my streams and videos. And yeah, I've been wanting to play Persona 3 for a while. I remember I actually did start playing it, and I got pretty far into it a few years ago. But unfortunately, I didn't finish it, and I lost my save file, so I had to start all over, but that's fine. Also worth noting that I played this game modded, so my rating for this game is obviously somewhat affected by those mods. For example, I used a mod where you can actually directly control your party members. Usually those are AI controlled, and you have to basically give them directions, if you will. You basically have to tell them what to do and then just hope they do the right thing. I personally just didn't really jive with this. I just much prefer having direct control over all the party members. Although I do know that for Persona 3, I know what it's supposed to accomplish, but it just wasn't for me. And I had a mod that changes it, and I knew I would enjoy the game more, so I was like, why not? There were some other mods in there too, but those were mostly visual. But yeah, I really enjoyed this game, 100%. Interestingly enough, I think the gameplay, despite everything, despite the mods I threw at it, was still the weakest part. There's times in the game where kind of nothing is really happening, and you're just waiting for things to happen. I also thought the combat was somewhat unbalanced. Like, there were some bosses that really kicked my shit in for no reason. Difficulty-wise, this is a tough nut, and I would honestly recommend to play this on easy if you're playing this for the first time. Also, wasn't really huge on the main dungeon in this game, Tartarus. And it's not even because of the reason most people dislike it, which is that there's like 200 floors or whatever. That barely changed, but it's actually because I just didn't really enjoy navigating it, and I don't know, it felt like sometimes I got hit by shadows. Like, basically the way the game works is you walk around Tartarus and you have like shadows, like these weird like black blobs, just kind of like, you know, walking around. And the way it works is if you hit them from behind with your sword or whatever, you basically get the 1-up, and if they hit you, they get the 1-up. And the AI for these is so fucking bad. Like, they would see me all the time for no reason when I would try to sneak up on them, or I wouldn't really hit them. Like, it just felt like really clunky. And then some more specific issues with the gameplay, which is really more down to this one being older. Like, for example, how skill inheritance isn't a thing. So when you fuse two of your personas together, which basically a persona is like a, you know, a set of skills that you have, and you can fuse them together to make a stronger persona with better stats. You oftentimes can't really, or like you can't decide at all what skills you want to like transfer over. It's all down to luck. So there's like a couple of gripes that I had with this game, mainly because it's older, you know. However, story-wise, Jesus Christ. This is, I think, like really the first game in this video where I'm like, the story hits like a fucking truck. Jesus Christ. I might even go as far to say this is like the best story in Persona 3. Maybe not my favorite, but probably just the best, because shit hits the fans so hard. There's some issues with the story that I will definitely point out. Like, for example, there are certain antagonists that I don't want to spoil right now. I feel like they haven't really had enough character development or involvement, and then they just die and you're like, okay, I don't care. Just how it is. So it's not all perfect, but when it all hits near the end, Christ. And also the characters that you spend time with, they feel, what I really liked about them is that they really didn't feel like characters. They felt like actual people, right? Like your party members. It all felt really, really real. And it felt like you're spending time with real people that you get to know. And yeah, I don't know, man. Something about this game just felt extremely special. So even if my rating may be a little bit low for some people, I'm giving this one 85%. This one's still fantastic. 100%. And I really cannot wait for the remake that comes out in, I think, like 2 months. Because once again, like, my main issue with this game is some minor plot-related stuff, as I said, like the antagonist that just you don't care about, and some gameplay stuff. And once they fix that, while also making the game look even better, they're on to something, man. So yeah, really excited for that one. Alright, and here we go with another game that came out this year. Now the interesting thing about this one is I actually bought and played this when it came out and then dropped it after like 1 hour of gameplay. So we're talking about Resident Evil 4, the remake, and what's interesting with this one is that despite the PC port actually being like fairly clean, somehow it had like really broken ray tracing implementation. And this is like one of the first like big AAA titles that I was playing on this PC, which I built last year, at the end of last year. So I was like, okay, let me try like this ray tracing thing. Let me see what it's all about, and it completely fucked the game up. So in the beginning, in the village section, basically, where you have to fend off a bunch of enemies for like 5 minutes, which is like pure terror, and I never want to do more than once. That's where the game crashed all the time. So I had to do this village section, I think like at least 5 times. So this insane terror that just makes you sweaty, I had to go through this 5 times, man. At some point I just gave up with the crashes. Like when it just keeps crashing there, I just gave up at some point. Eventually I did learn that it was because of some ray tracing settings that I had enabled in-game that unfortunately makes the game crash. So I was like, cool, now I know how to fix it. But for some reason that kind of like put me off enough to not really play the game again until like I think 2 or 3 months after, when I went back into it. And I mean, everyone's already talked about this game, and I can only like just, you know, repeat what everyone else is saying. This one's a banger. This one's such a good remake, such a good game overall. It's once again one of those games where it's just really hard to find fault in. I think they improved the story. I think that's one thing that's very noteworthy that I think a lot of people aren't really talking about. I'm not gonna go into like any details, but I like that they got more out of the characters that had very little screen time. I like that they made Ashley a lot more competent, a lot less annoying, and just generally like there's so much about this game that is to love. Now what's interesting is that since I did play the original Resident Evil 4 before this one, I was actually a little bit disappointed that a few areas were cut out. So a few things that appeared in the original game did not appear in the remake. Certain sections, certain set pieces, certain areas. And I was like, damn, why is that stuff missing? You know, that really sucked. So this is where things get weird, right? So initially, because of that, because this was already a problem with the Resident Evil 3 remake, by the way, although to a much larger degree there, I only gave this an 89, which is once again a really high rating, but I guess it's not like, you know, 10 out of 10s or like 9 out of 10s as most people would give it. But here's what's weird. I think like half a year later, they put out a DLC for this game, Separate Ways. Now, Separate Ways was also an expansion in the original Resident Evil 4. And back then, it wasn't really anything to write home about. Like, you played as Ada Wong, and it was fine. Like, it's not super memorable. It's just more content, I guess, for Resident Evil 4. But to me, it never really added anything majorly new other than playing as Ada. But with this Separate Ways DLC, holy crap. I cannot believe this DLC is only $10. That is nuts to me. Like, the amount of extra content they put in there and how good this is, how they made Ada, which was like a major, you know, pain point for many people, myself included. Like, most people really focus on the voice acting. For me, it wasn't really the voice acting, but also just the character being less interesting in the remake. But with this DLC, I feel like they really redeemed her. Like, she's a lot more cocky, has like fun one-liners. The gameplay, you know, they did so much more interesting stuff with it. And what I talked about earlier, the areas they cut out, as well as boss fights and areas, are in this DLC to make this DLC more interesting. So now I'm in this dilemma where I'm like, should I rate this game as it is, or should I rate this game with the DLC? Because with the DLC, 100% it's in the 90s territory. I cannot believe the DLC they made for this is just $10. Especially it's like really long. It took me like 7 or 8 hours. Absolutely nuts. So it's weird. I'm still gonna stick with my original 89 rating because I'm just talking about the base game. But with the DLC included, this is like a 95 or I don't know, somewhere in that ballpark. Really good. I cannot believe it's just $10. Alright, and here we go. Now another game that released this year, and I think this might have also been the last released game that I played this year. And it's What a surprise. Another Like a Dragon game. So this one is Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name, aka Like a Dragon Gaiden, the game with a long name, because holy shit, that's a long name. So this one's basically a side story, if you will. Gaiden, I think, literally means side story in Japanese, or at least something adjacent to it. And this one basically tells the story of Yakuza Like a Dragon, but from a different character's perspective. And this one really surprised me. So I went into this with like really mild expectations, because it's, you know, it's a smaller game. It's just a side game because it's a game about a side story. It was cheaper. You know, I was already told this is shorter. So I went into this expecting, you know, it's probably just gonna be like some, you know, recycled content, but, you know, with like a bit of an extra story. But that's the undersell of the year. Like, this game in general is just the undersell of the year. Holy crap. The amount of extra content in this game is nuts. Like, there's stuff in this that I really didn't expect at all, and I don't want to spoil. The story, dude, the story is one of the best in the entire series. It's a side story. It's a side game, dude. Like, the entire ending, like, it's not actually often that I cry at media. So, like, I don't actually cry often at, like, games or movies. This one, I swear to God, I don't think I ever cried this hard about any video game ending ever. The story on this ends on such a fucking depressing note, but also like kind of hopeful note. Like, it's just such a barrage of emotions that even thinking back on, I get emotional again. Story-wise, this was insanely strong. Gameplay-wise, this was insanely strong. They basically have added this like fighting style where you can basically use a bunch of gadgets, and they were so fucking fun. The side content was so good. Like, this is such an insanely good game. Really, the only thing that I can critique about this one is that it wasn't longer. And even in saying that, it's longer than I thought. Like, it says like 39 hours on this one. I even got the platinum medal on this one, or like all the achievements on Steam. That's how good this was. Yeah, insane. Like, I guess the only thing that bothered me was like, once again, just very specific stuff. So some plot points where I was like, that's kind of cheap. Or, you know, specific boss fights where I'm like, I didn't really enjoy this one. You know, stuff like this. But, like, if you, like, this is once again a game that I wouldn't recommend anyone to, like, just play, like, that hasn't played any previous Like a Dragon or Yakuza games. But if you've played all the games prior to this, goddamn, like, I think this game alone is worth playing the entire series for. And to say this about a side game is ridiculous. So this one I'm giving a 90%, and with 90% and 90%, this is where I think, at least in my book, we're in like straight up masterpiece material. This is where I think we are in the territory of games that really stick with you for a really long time, that I kept thinking about for weeks after finishing them. And Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name, the game with the long name, is the first in like I think 6 games that I played this year that really stuck with me. What a game, dude! So good. Alright, next up we have the final Nintendo game in the ranking, and this one is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, it's kind of interesting because this one I started, I think, like, definitely sometime last year, and then I just sort of dropped. And interestingly enough, what got me into this game again is buying a new monitor. So I didn't actually play this one on the Wii U or on the Switch, I played this emulator on PC. And the amount of stuff you can do with this game on PC is super cool. And basically I got this, like, ultra-wide OLED monitor that looks fabulous. And I was like, okay, I really want to test this with some games. And one of the games that I actually tried out with this one was Breath of the Wild, which I kind of sort of dropped after like maybe like 20 hours or so. Not because it was like bad or anything, but because, I don't know, some other games just interested me more at the time, I guess. And I played this one. It had, like, you know, mods available for like proper 21:9 format and everything, and not only looked the game fucking beautiful, and I think it's also the fact that the game did look so gorgeous on PC that I just kept playing, but at some point it just really clicked for me. And it's interesting because I played this pretty much during the time, and I finished this during the time when Tears of the Kingdom came out. And it was a weird feeling because everyone is playing the new shiny thing, Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm playing the old crusty Breath of the Wild. But there's something about this game that, just like with Super Mario Galaxy, is extremely hard to put into words. This is an empty game. And I mean this in a good way, in the best possible way. This is a game where I just really enjoyed the fucking silence, other than maybe like the you know, trees and the wind and also the slight piano soundtrack, which, by the way, the soundtrack is great in this one. But where I just really enjoyed just standing around and just doing nothing. And just, like, it's once again, it's such a hard feeling to describe. It's something where it's an experience that you just really need to want and need to know where to get. And that's exactly what I got from Breath of the Wild, right? And I think this is, where I think Tears of the Kingdom is mainly different. Right, this game, the emptiness of this game is what makes it so good. Like, all those quiet moments in between is something that I don't think any game can replicate. Beyond that, though, I enjoyed this game and what it had to offer. As with some of the previous games that I played here, I'll have to put a bit of a disclaimer. I did play this game slightly modded. I am very sorry. For example, one of the mods that I slept on was a durability mod, which is like one of the main gripes that people have with this game, is that basically weapons that you pick up from somewhere break immediately or break extremely quickly. Pissed me off, just like most other people, so I basically installed a mod that increases the durability to like 3 or 5x, and I had more fun immediately. But I enjoyed the combat. It's really difficult. One thing I gotta say, it's really goddamn difficult. This is a game that I really wasn't prepared for how difficult it was, but it really was. Like, it really genuinely kicked my ass at times. But yeah, like, exploring was super fun. There's stuff everywhere. People also really don't like the shrines because they're kind of boring. I gotta say, I love the shrines. I'm weird. I'm weird like that. I don't know. The fact that every shrine had like something unique to offer in terms of like level design was really interesting to me, even if not all of them were great. Well, I guess there was the combat shrines, which kind of sucked, but yeah, whatever. We don't talk about those. And I also really enjoyed the story. And also the approach to storytelling was very different. So basically, you get like a bunch of photos in an album that you have to basically track the location down from. And once you get to those locations, you get a short story snippet that happened before the events of the game, where basically shit's completely fucked. And you get to see, what happened before shit got fucked. This story was so sad. And what happened in it was so sad. I felt so sorry for the characters. Like, I felt genuine empathy for everyone. And I think that was really, really strong. Like, I didn't expect the story to be like such a big takeaway from me with this one, but it really was. And yeah, it was kind of like the game that revolutionized open world games and how game developers look at open world games, Whereas before, and I mean, still nowadays, they were a lot of, very much by the book open world games with collectibles and mission markers. And this game just completely makes away with any of it. And, it's a game where you just kind of have to explore, and you're driven by your intrinsic, interest in what this world has to offer. And, if that's an experience you're looking for, it can be incredibly therapeutic, and it really was therapeutic for me. So yeah, Breath of the Wild was fantastic. It was also my very first Zelda game, and I don't think I could have started with a better game. Like, I really love this one. 91%. Alright, and now we're moving on to the sequel of a game that I talked about earlier, where I was like, I kinda wanted more out of this. So now we're talking about Lost Judgment, which is the sequel to Judgment. And I guess with this one, it was kind of the opposite, because Judgment was good, but not as good as I was hoping for. My expectations were a bit more mild with Lost Judgment. Dude, it slapped. Like, this is a slapper. Like, this is... Jesus Christ. So much good about this one. I don't think I've ever played a game with better combat. Full stop. Like, I could play this game for hours just beating up people, like, and just engaging in the combat. It's that good. Like, everything was so good. They added a new fighting style, the snake style, which is more like counter-based, and the animations, everything's so good. Ah, man, this game also had like so much content that I really enjoyed. So this is gonna sound kind of weird, but you're basically a middle-aged man in a school beating up children, okay, and teenagers. That sounds really weird on paper, but trust me, like, it makes sense in context. And basically you get involved in the school and in like various school activities. So you have, for example, a skating club where you can do some skating. That was fucking rad. Or a boxing club where you can participate in, boxing matches, which was also fucking rad. Like, there's just so much to do in this game, and most of it was fun. There was really only like a few activities, like, for example, there was like a photography club that I thought was kind of meh. But the stuff that's meh, at least, is like over with quickly. There's one specific activity, the robotics club, that people really didn't like. I thought it was fine, actually. I actually thought it was decently fun. Just like the rest of the game. Gameplay-wise, this is some of the best shit I've ever played. Like, straight up. This is like a game that I think would never be not fun for me personally. And it's something that I always kind of think about getting back into. Although I've kind of like done mostly everything that I wanted to do. It's just so fun. The game looks so good too. The cutscenes, like, it's just... This is, in my opinion, the dev studio, like RGG, which, who once again also made the Yakuza games. I think this is like them at their peak. 100%. This one's such a slapper. The main thing that people actually would say is, or like generally agree on, is that they didn't think the story was as good in this game as in the previous one. I gotta say, I kind of disagree. It's not because I think it's perfect in every single way, and certainly it's like less of a bulletproof detective plot as the first Judgment game. But I feel like what this game, at least for me personally, and what I am looking for in a story, did better, is that this one was more character driven, was more character focused. You know, the main character you play as, you know, went through more emotionally difficult, you know, situations, and also all the, you know, side characters got more time to shine. You know, it actually felt like you're a crew this time around with your you know, with your friends in the game and everything. Like, it felt like much more connected, everything. And also the main villain was so much more complex. Like, I gotta be honest, like the last fight, the last boss fight, I'm not gonna show you for spoiler reasons, but the last boss fight in the first Judgment was super cool in terms of, like, you know, how the fight developed and everything. But story-wise, it was kind of like, ah, okay, whatever. This one, though, hit a lot harder because it's, you know, a villain that you can't really 100% disagree with, you know. I really enjoyed that they played more with, like, moral grace in this, you know, in this plot. And it wasn't just, like, a detective plot, but it was also, you know, a plot of, like, morals. And it made you think, and it made you, like, agree with someone and disagree. And in fact, with the final boss in this game, you actually have, like, a really nice back and forth where sometimes he's your friend, sometimes he's your foe, sometimes friend again, and then foe again, friend again. I really like that. I don't know, something about this story just clicked way more with me. And to be honest, maybe it is because I already spent time with the characters from the previous game, so I'm immediately more invested, of course. Maybe if I were to replay the first Judgment, I would, you know, maybe like the story more, who knows. But Lost Judgment was so good. This was such a damn good game, and I think it's actually the one game, or like one of the games that I played this year that I have the most amount of playtime in. So yeah, giving this one a 92%. Super good. Alright, and now we're into the top 3, and I promise this is the last Yakuza game that we'll talk about here. It's just, I'm sorry, this is a franchise that I really like. And this one's Yakuza Like a Dragon. And I think this was actually the first game that I played this year. I think, in fact, I actually started it in 2022. Like, I started it in the end of 2022 and just kind of played it over the new year. And before we move on, I guess this is already a spoiler, but all of the, or like the last 2 games that are coming up here, they all have the same rating. So just because I'm putting, like, let's say Yakuza Like a Dragon underneath the other ones doesn't mean I like it less. This is just the order that I have in my spreadsheet here. This is literally the only reason why. For me, they're all like on the same level. And also, like, these games here, I think those are games that really left like a personal impression on me. Like, those are games where I feel like I went out of these games, or like I finished these games as, like, it sounds weird saying this, but like as a better, bigger, stronger person. I feel like these games genuinely changed and shaped who I am because they left that big of an impression. And Yakuza Like a Dragon was one of the 3 games in the top 3 here that deserve this, like, you know, this kind of praise, which is why I've given all of these a 95%. This just as like a small little interlude here, but yeah, moving on. So here's the thing, I actually, despite there being like, you know, JRPGs in this list that are fairly high ranked, and in fact there's gonna be one more JRPG in the top 3 that will be coming up after this, I actually like super fell out of JRPGs and RPGs. I don't know what it was, but it's just not something I could really be invested in. Something about the gameplay, something about whatever, just didn't really click for me. This game alone sold the entire genre for me again. You know, and 100% in like such a good fashion. It made JRPGs and RPGs in general fun for me again. The gameplay in this is fantastic. It's not perfect, but it's like fantastic. You know, what they do with this game, like it was kind of like a, you know, a different direction that they went for with this one, because, you know, the previous Yakuza games were more like brawler style and more like a little bit, I don't want to say down to earth, because this game is also very down to earth. But you know, they went kind of crazy with this one. Let's just say that, you know, new protagonist, new everything, and like it felt so fresh. I don't know what it was with this game, but like this game just, I don't know. It has so much content too. There's so much to do, and pretty much all of it was really fun. However, with this game, the story hit me like a goddamn truck. Like, so hard. I didn't expect the story to go this hard, because, you know, it's mostly a lot of new characters that come in. But there's so many awesome moments that happen in the story of this game that I still think about to this day. I was also, like, extremely emotional near the end. This is really a genuine masterpiece, this game. I honestly have nothing bad to say, which is why this section is probably a little bit shorter than the last, but I think this is actually a must-play. Like, I think if you've never played a JRPG, this is like one that will 100% get you into it. Fantastic. Also, the soundtrack is great. In fact, the soundtrack in this game is so good. And I like this game so much that I used a song from this game as my introduction in the Pepega mode. So in the, you know, cutscene that you watch when you basically challenge my character in the Pro Street Pepega mode. There's a song playing from this game that really stuck with me, you know, that happened, or that plays during like a very pivotal moment where I was like, damn. So yeah, fantastic game. I love what they did with this, and I really cannot wait for the next game, which actually also comes out in a month. Okay, I'm adding a little audio bit here for Yakuza Like a Dragon. I'm actually talking about this after already wrapping up the video, but it's something that I still had to add. Because I talked about the personal impact that the next two games that I'll also talk about after this kind of like had on me, and Yakuza Like a Dragon had that too. And this is kind of where you know, why I'm giving these games such a high rating, as with this one, for example, a 95%. So Yakuza Like a Dragon and its story is a game about it never being too late to start your own life, which is kind of weird for me because I turned 24 this year, which is still fairly young. But it's something that I could really appreciate because it gave me a lot of, it took off a lot of like existential dread, because sometimes I'm like, well, what if this like YouTube thing or the streaming thing isn't for me anymore? What am I gonna do then? You know, right? And then I haven't had then I didn't study, I didn't go to university, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. But what this game tries to teach people is that it's actually not too late to start your own life. It doesn't matter how old you are, where you are in life. It's never too late to just start doing what you actually want to do. Whether or not you'll be successful with it or not is a different, you know, different topic entirely. But it's never too late to just start something that you really want to start doing, no matter how old you are. And I thought that's such an interesting thing to tackle, especially for a JRPG, which are mostly like, you know, you're like a young guy, and you know, it's usually like a coming of age story, like most JRPGs have. And I thought this was such an interesting plot point, such an interesting topic to tackle. So yeah, I just wanted to add this as an addendum to just really explain and drill home why I'm giving this game such a high rating. And you know, these three games, these top one, like all these three games that share the top one spot, they are the top one spot because they left me as a, you know, better, changed, grown person, basically. So yeah, giving this one a 95%. This is like as close to perfection as it gets in my opinion. There's really only like minor gripes I had with this. Fantastic. So next up, once again, also with a rating of 95%, as all of these have, Persona 4 Golden, which I already kind of like hinted at earlier. I'm not sure if you guys are super surprised to see this super high up here. But yeah, just like Yakuza Like a Dragon, it's also a JRPG, or albeit a little bit different one. And also like a pretty old game, actually. Like, I think the original Persona 4 released on like PS2 in like 2008 or 2009 roundabout. Golden was a re-release for PS Vita that they eventually, thankfully, brought over to PC. And I just remembered like a really funny story about that I don't think I've ever told on video. But basically, I actually wanted to play this game years ago. Actually, way before it was dropped on Steam and other consoles. And the only real way to play this, you know, on something that's not a Vita, was to basically get a PlayStation TV, which was like a sort of mini console that you could plug into like a monitor or your TV to play PlayStation Vita and PSP games off of. And I had that one, and I bought the game for it, but I never actually got around to play it. And here's the funny part. This PlayStation TV, I know this has nothing to do with the game, but it's funny. This PlayStation TV that I had back then, I still lived in my old apartment, and like in a different apartment back then, at some point fell behind a heater, okay? Behind one of these things. And I couldn't get it out. I couldn't get it out, and I also had no idea how to even take a heater off. Was it even something I was allowed to do? I don't know. I just kind of forgot about it eventually. And it wasn't until I moved into this apartment, circa like 2.5 years ago, where I was like, wait a minute. Did I forget something? So yeah, my old PlayStation TV is probably still melting behind the heater of the old apartment forever and ever. But back to the game. So I'm just gonna cut down to the main reason why I'm giving Persona 4 Golden such a high rating. I could obviously get into like the nitty-gritty of the story, and like, by lord, there's so much I absolutely loved about this game. I mean, I loved this game so much that I actually even cosplayed the main character this year, okay? Just to give you an idea. That's how much I love this game. You know, and in particular, I love the music. I love all the characters in this game. I love the plot, the setting, like the city this game plays in, Inaba. There's not really much about this game that I didn't really love. But the main reason why I'm putting this so high up is because this is, in my opinion, a game about... I mean, it's a game about many things. It's a game that tackles a lot of topics. But a topic that this game tackled for me personally, that really resonated with me and was a bit of a wake-up call, like a slap in the face, for me personally, a good one, is that this is about a game about, like... it sounds weird to say, but I'll get to specifics. But like about friendship, right? And the main thing this game really drilled into my head, because here's the problem. I actually, for a lot of years now, and this, sorry if this gets like a little personal here, but I've struggled with loneliness issues. Like I feel extremely lonely. I think honestly I've always felt lonely in my life, but especially in like recent years it like really kicked up a notch with COVID and also like being alone in this apartment. Like, you know, prior to this year, I don't think I've ever felt more lonely in my life. And what this game did was not just give me like a taste of what it's like to have like, you know, always have like friends around you, but one aspect that this game like really drilled into my head is that people don't need to be around you physically to be with you, right? Does that make sense? Like, and that's something that I didn't really like fully understand or realize. Like I was always under the impression that I'm lonely because I don't have friends here. You know, I don't meet my friends often enough. You know, I don't do anything. Like I'm just spending like several months in my apartment on my own. Like I would occasionally still like obviously talk to my friends and family and whatnot, but it wouldn't actually like solve this like loneliness issue. I would always be like, oh, I'm so alone. But loneliness and being alone are two different things. And just because you are alone doesn't mean you need to feel lonely. And that's something that really that this game really drilled into my head, because it's something that gets touched upon later. And it's like, damn, like I actually, after finishing this game and watching like the last cutscene, I cried for like 10 minutes. Because I was like, how did I not see this earlier? How did I not understand this earlier? And just for the sake of, you know, this game and its story having such a profound personal effect on me, where I don't want to say like it single-handedly fixed my loneliness issues, because I still have them occasionally, but at least got them to a point where it was like bearable to me. That's a huge accomplishment. And at that point, I don't give a fuck about the flaws of this game. I don't give a fuck how weird certain sections were. I don't give a fuck about the gameplay. I don't give a fuck about anything else. Because this game genuinely means something to me. And that's why I'm also giving this one a 95%. Because, goddamn, man. Alright, and with that, we're finally at the last game of the video. Once again, this is not like top one. Top one is shared between 3 games. This is just, once again, the last one in my list. And thank God we're finally wrapping up here. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be, but the recording at this point is 1 hour and 26 minutes. And my throat is starting to hurt. So we're just going to talk about Red Dead Redemption 2. I did play the first Red Dead Redemption, I think like a year ago or so, and I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was like that like crazy good as some other people. I thought it was fine, you know. I thought the story could have been a little bit more interesting, could have, you know, done a little bit more to have me invested, although it did have some really strong plot points. But I liked the gameplay. I think the world could have been a little bit more interesting maybe, but I mean, you're in the middle of a fucking, like, in the middle of fucking nowhere in like the 1800s, so I guess what do you expect? But it was like a fun cowboy game, you know, that was good. So imagine my reaction when Red Dead Redemption 2 absolutely fucking destroyed me, dude. Like, this is once again a game where I often just sit somewhere or stand somewhere and do nothing, because it's just like, it's one of those games that makes you feel like, man, you know what I mean? Like, goddamn, like, this is, first of all, this is such a goddamn pretty game. It's also just something I want to point out, and a game that I wish I could play again, or that I'm probably gonna play again, because I unfortunately played this on a fairly inferior monitor. But it's so pretty. The characters feel so real. The gunplay, although I feel like at this point maybe a little bit outdated, was still extremely fun. The missions are interesting. So here's the thing, right? What does a game having good missions mean? I gotta be honest, there's missions in this game that are somewhat forgettable, but I feel like that's the point, because, you know, oftentimes in Red Dead Redemption 2 you do nothing, right? Often in time, like, Red Dead Redemption 2 is a really slow game, right? And I think it's a slow game by design, because when shit hits the fan, it hits way harder. Like an action game that lasts, like, let's say for example, a Call of Duty, for example, where shit hits the fan all the time. You get kind of like desensitized. It doesn't matter to you anymore, it's whatever. In Red Dead Redemption 2, where shit hits the fan only like every 20 hours or so, it hits hard. It hits extremely hard. I just think this game is a complete masterpiece on, once again, almost every front. It's not for everyone, right? Like, if you don't like slow, methodical games, this isn't for you. And by all accounts, you know, having played the first Red Dead, that's not something I expected going into this. Not that anyone, I'd imagine. But I think what they did with this game was extremely brave. And in fact, I will make a separate video on this game because there's so much more I want to talk about. Not about the story, not about the gameplay, but about the game itself and what it means. And how brave Rockstar was to make such a game. And once again, I'm giving this a high rating and I'm trying to explain why. But basically what this game is about it not being too late to be a good person. And what it means to actually be a man. And being a man does not mean hitting the gym and getting a bunch of bitches and all that nonsense. Being a man means doing good things, helping people around you. Even no matter how much crap you've done, you know, it's never too late. It's just a game that once again left a really profound impact on me personally, for the value that or for the values and morals that this game tries to convey. I was like, damn, I really never thought about it this way before. I did not expect this from a cowboy action game. Absolute masterpiece. I think something that I think everyone should at least try. Once again, it's not for everyone. Don't go into this expecting shooty action. That's not the kind of game this is. Go into this more like, you know, with the same mindset you would go into with, let's say, Breath of the Wild. You're in for a ride you'll absolutely never forget. What a masterpiece. Alright, and that should wrap it up. I think, I don't know how many games I actually went through in this video, but I know that it took way too long. I thought this was gonna be like, maybe like an hour tops, maybe like 45 minutes, but this took like pretty much twice as long, so that's great. I hope you enjoyed me rambling about my favorite games, or maybe even least favorite games of this year, and let me know if you want to see more videos like this. I actually kind of want to make videos on specific games where I just talk about something specific. As I already said, I think I will probably make at least one video on Red Dead Redemption 2 because there's something about this game that I have to talk about that I've never seen anyone else talk about. So that's probably gonna be a video, but if you want to hear me ramble more about my favorite games, let me know in the comments below, and maybe, who knows, we'll make another video like this one by the end of 2024. But yeah, that's about it from me. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you had a great 2023, and I hope you have a even better year 2024. Alright, thanks so much for listening. Take care, take it easy, and peace. See you guys.